Whoa, what's with the sensationalism? Clickbait, clickbait. You know what? Shut up. It's not really clickbait.
Okay, I hate dishonesty and misleading content as much as the next guy. And if you don't think about it too hard, it looks like it's all of those greedy click farmers out there that are causing the internet to become such a cesspool. But maybe we're all responsible for it. What? How? By impulsive clicking. If you were just here cycling through all of this filth fishing for something to watch, but you are never satisfied with what you find, you aren't just part of the problem, you are the problem.
Skynet is the virus. It's the reason everything's falling apart.
Soak that in for a bit. Ideas spread, even bad ones. That's just their nature.
Yeah. Clear enough for you? All right. Yeah.
One idea that spreads like wildfire is blame. It makes sense, since nobody likes to be held accountable. But misplaced blame spreads just as fast, and in this case, it's the scummy clickbaiters who get a disproportionate amount of credit for making the interwebs so rife with misinformation. But it's not the baiters' fault, it's the clickers. Because supply-side economics doesn't work. Why? Because that's just a theoretical model, and such ideal systems don't work in the real world. A perfect machine requires a perfect operator to provide perfect performance. Here are a few other examples of, quote, perfect systems that you may have noticed tend to also crash when they come in contact with the ever-changing rules of reality.
To be honest, the people that complain about clickbait, they're worse than the clickbait itself. We really face bigger problems. And besides, the numbers I'm citing are conservative estimates. This thing really can hold a ton. So it's not really clickbait per se. But forget all of that. Don't make the solution worse than the problem. So what in the world do we use it for? I have no idea. A stand and spin. Other than that, I'm at a loss. It's just two heavy-duty weights, 25-pounders. Look at this. It has this natural sort of cove in it. Hercules brand. I'm sure you can find it at one of those secondhand sports shops or maybe the thrift store. Whoops, a daisy. Okay, it's 17 golf balls. And so, where I get my numbers, well, let's just say that each one can support 100 pounds, which it can easily. And if you don't believe me, stand on one. I balanced a 50-pound weight on one edgewise, and it showed minimal signs of compression. I mean, it wasn't even noticeable. So, if they can hold 100 pounds apiece and you have 17 of them, assuming that the load is distributed evenly, then yeah, it should do 1,700 pounds, but it should get more than that. I would guess a ton. But what do you use it for? I have no idea. It's just cool. Yep, times are getting tough. Expectations are running high. On the last video I made that coffee table thing. So it's as though some people expect a piece of fine furniture every time, but this is a novelty channel and it's my second channel, and I'm not really concerned with producing top-notch content. I just don't want to dance for you. If you're interested, fine. If you're not, go away. And this is not the last bastion of free speech either. You are not free to... come on, I've voiced my opinion on this subject before. You are not free to just openly insult me here with any sort of profanity that springs into your head. I will suppress you and block you. I like constructive criticism. I do. I love it. But I don't need insults. And if this one-ton bearing doesn't live up to your expectations, then I invite you to leave. Okay. Actually, that's enough about this, because as I've said, this is a secondary channel and I have other interests here. Now, to those of you who are still remaining with this video, I apologize for the whiny tone, but man, you have to vent because it gets old. And I know you hear all these YouTubers say, at some point they all have some breakdown about the complaint, the incessant complaining and the nitpicking and the just mean commentary. I weather it well enough, I suppose, but at some point you just really become intolerant to it. It's awful. Anyhow, what is it? Magnet fishing. It's for magnet fishing. I didn't actually go magnet fishing, but I made this, in preparation for it. Yeah, you can get these at Harbor Crap, and I think they claim 35 pounds or some such nonsense. Yeah, forget that. But it will certainly do for almost 25 pounds. Realistically, if you find something like this, at least this heavy underwater, it's probably large enough that you're not going to be able to pull it out anyways. You probably found a Volkswagen. Things less than this should come right up. I've never done it. I've been meaning to, but I've never done it. This, I want to tell you about it because it's pretty interesting, but I'm going to need the tripod. Just a quick note. It started off like this, but it would just go haywire if you just attached a rope directly to it, so I bent it into this parabolic shape in the vise, and then I filled it full of wood. And all of this is designed to keep it from snagging on edges. As with any fishing lure, as you pull it, if it's got a square edge, it's more likely to snag, and then you lose your lure. Admittedly, I'm no expert, as I've already confessed I've never even done it before, but I'm going to use a technique like this, where this is tentatively my plan for my first approach, is to just drop it straight in and try not to fish side to side too much. It'd be nice to have a bridge or something to do it from. And I do have an old bridge in mind, but it's very old, and I'm afraid that I'll probably just dig up a bunch of 100-year-old railroad spikes. I've settled into this sort of, I post this, the main channel video, and this, what you're watching now, it's supplement at within a reasonable time frame of one another. So that way this is kind of like a supplemental. Not so much, I'm not trying to keep any sort of rigorous story here, but just so you know, this is my recent project. I just put some epoxy on it. I don't need to go over too much here because there will be a complete video about it. This case was one of the most satisfying prototypes ever. Usually prototyping involves lots of trial and error, and this was, well, I think as you'll see in the video, it's satisfying. It's fun and relatively easy if you follow my procedure. But we'll see, because I haven't officially had success with it yet. So it's very promising. And if this is released without this ever being released, then that was a failure, and in which case I'll update this and talk more about it. I did get the toothpick holder to work. Well, yeah. If you want to call that working. Wow, that's probably like at least 4 or 5% success rate. I really wanted to rebuild it because when I was amidst the construction of this, I had figured out along the way what it would take to improve it. I found out all of its design flaws and what it would require to make it perfect. And enough time has elapsed at this point that I don't remember. I do remember that I wanted this to be longer than the toothpick. And I wanted this to be, instead of the acrylic glass being recessed into a route, I wanted the acrylic glass to be attached directly to a piece of plywood, like a right triangle piece of plywood, and then add 3/4 on each side for the piece of plywood on each side, and then this tumbler thing would be twice as long. But I didn't do it. It's just too much work, and I've lost my love for it. But who knows, maybe I'll revisit it someday. You might be wondering about this parabolic shape. I probably won't mention it more than just a passing sentence or two in the video. But what is the basis for this shape? There really isn't one. I just held the... Oh no, it's stuck. Oh. Okay, wait. Oh, tragedy has befallen us. There wasn't supposed to be epoxy underneath that. It was only supposed to be one side at a time. I'll have to polish that away and coat it again. But what was the basis for this parabolic shape? There wasn't any. It's just based on my hand. Here, I'll show you. I simply held the hand in place and looked at it from a bird's eye view, top down, and I just sketched the shape out. But I only did half, and then I folded it so that it would be a reflection to give it a more perfect symmetry. Actually, I think I did it the whole way around, and then I estimated the average by folding it over and holding it up to, or passing light through one side, and then finding the average of the curve. And then when you open it up, you want to make sure that it doesn't have that sort of top of the heart butt crack shape, or the opposite of that. Really, why would you struggle with holding true to some precise mathematical definition when oftentimes your eye is just a better indicator of what is good aesthetics? You wouldn't expect somebody who used to be so mathematically rigorous like myself to say that, would you? But really, I do hold intuition. I do place value on intuition at times. By the way, in case you're wondering, this, I don't know if you might have seen it floating around in the background, this is the inside of an LED bulb. I didn't sacrifice it just out of pure curiosity. It was inconsistent, it was sketchy, so it was a good excuse to cut one open and see what's inside of it. It operates just fine without having its dome, and I don't even think that LEDs are bothered by dust or any sort of simple contaminants like that. It's pretty rigorous, but there's no point in me showing you it in operation because it will just blind you, or more specifically blind the camera and render it inoperative. Yes, camera people, I'm aware that I can adjust the exposure and give you a better picture, but please just do it yourselves if you want to see it. You'll understand it better if you just see it in person. Don't make me go through the trouble, and please don't give me a lecture on my camera. It's so tedious. Okay, on to the next subject. This stuff, this epoxy stuff, it really grabs the BBs well, but it peels away from silicone perfectly. I mean, you would think that this would be a catastrophe to have it impregnated by no, it's not even a bad thing. It's easy. It's actually somewhat satisfying to pull it away in the same sort of bizarre pleasure that you get from peeling the skin away from a sunburn. Epoxy is just brutal aggressive. In just a few exceptions, number one being silicone. And also, for some reason, I think polypropylene and polyethylene, I think I've had good luck with it on PVC, but yeah, common plastics, it's not good for that usually. It works surprisingly well on glass, though, I must admit. Epoxy also works exquisitely well on acrylic glass. Did you notice that skillful transition? See, I'm no slouch. I'm trained in public speaking. And no, really, you're supposed to make like a transition, but it's very unnatural to speak that way. So you'll notice rather professional presenters will say, and now we will talk about, now that we've talked about this, let's talk about this. And that sort of fluid transition. Although it's very unnatural in just common speech, it makes your speaking a lot easier to, it just works better for a mass audience. Here I am giving you like a lecture on public speaking, and I'm rambling and stumbling over my words and stammering, but this isn't a polished presentation. Sorry, the camera battery died. As I was saying, this isn't a polished presentation. It's just totally impromptu, and if I can make it even reasonably coherent, then I consider that satisfactory, because it's difficult. Try talking to yourself. And try making it a seamless narrative that has no discontinuities in it. It just doesn't work like that, because our stream of consciousness is just constantly interrupted by a myriad of environmental... Ooh, look, there's a bug. Yeah, see? That was more clever video irony. This is acrylic. Yes, really. It's acrylic glass. It came from here. See this little dado cut that I made so that the lid snaps in place? Pretty cool, right? Well, I did it all in the table saw with a single blade, and I just made a cut and then moved the fence a little bit, made another cut, and so on. It left a big bird's nest of white, fluffy, sawdust-like stuff that was left over from the acrylic glass. And I knew that acetone was a solvent for acrylic glass, and some people use acetone as a makeshift weld to make boxes like this. I would not recommend it. They make an actual product for that, and you use a needle, like a syringe with a needle, and you just apply a drop of it, and then just through capillary action, or what, I don't know what the solvent is that does it, but it's probably quite similar to acetone, but it actually works to make a good weld, whereas acetone doesn't seem to work very effectively. I haven't had good success with it. Okay, I'm way off subject though. I took the bird's nest and I soaked it in acetone real quickly. I just submerged it all in and pushed it down, and it turned into something that had the consistency of silly putty, maybe. And this was after not even 5 or 6 seconds being submerged, and it already started to change. As I recall, I think it was an exothermic reaction. This is a couple weeks ago, so you have to get this stuff while it's still fresh in your head. If you don't capture it on tape or write it down or talk about it right away, you lose it. That's one of the caveats of experimental stuff. Okay, so I had a plaster mold for a perfect sphere, and I shoved it into that and pressed it down with a piece of glass. And you don't have very much time. There's not much working time. But I promptly removed it from the mold, and it does nicely as a moldable plastic. The solvent, there was still lots of solvent in it, maybe 20 minutes later. and I set it out in the sun for an hour or two, and then most of the visible solvent was gone, except for the smell, which took overnight to dissipate. Now today, 2 weeks later, which it didn't take this long, it took about a day or two before it was probably cured to its maximum. Now it's very, very hard and very resistant to scratch. This, I even tried to sand it on the disc sander and it moved very little. It was very abrasion resistant. So I suppose we could probably consider it like one of those foam products where they use, because it's lighter than solid acrylic would be. That's also why it's white. I mean, it's scattering the light that passes through it, unlike this, where it has more of a crystalline shape or structure to it. But this is like snow in so far as light maybe penetrates it, but then scatters. Yeah, so it has like a foam-like quality about it. They used foam in all sorts of metallurgical applications, like in airplanes. They use aluminum foam, where it's just they use a metal alloy and then they puff it full of air to make it lighter, but it still has a kind of structure to it, a foamy structure to it that still makes it strong yet light. So yeah, a piece of aluminum foam is ultra light density, but it's still a hard, strong metal that won't rust. You know, I wonder if that might make it more resistant to chemical decomposition too. I mean, since there are like pockets in it, maybe it would trap something that might decompose it. I remember that there are pretty strict regulations about transporting mercury on an airplane for that reason, because mercury will amalgamate with metals. And so you could spill enough mercury on an airplane and saw it in half, I suppose, by just letting it ooze through the fuselage. That word's hard to say, I apologize. Just like in Aliens. Remember when you blow an alien open and it's acid blood? Am I rambling? Really? You don't like that? Then remember back at the beginning I invited you to leave? But I also invite you to stay if you like that. Okay, on to something else.